I want you all to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and think about your childhood. What could you do for hours on end voluntarily and feel like no time had gone by? What activities gave you pure joy? Now think about yourself as an adult. Are there any activities that give you that same feeling? And if there are you making time for those things in your life? You can open your eyes. For me, I got that feeling of joy from stories. Whether I was portraying them in theatrical productions, or reading them in novels, or learning about them academically in school. And I gained this passion for the stories of our society, and I was drawn to the dark side. I was really, just enthralled with these stories about racial and gender discrimination and systematic poverty, things that turn most people off and make them sad and depressed. I got a big jump out of it because I didn't focus on the beginning of the story with all the tragedy and the heartache. I loved to imagine the end of the story, the eucatastrophe that could bring us out of these terrible situations, that could lead to a gentle denouement to a better society. And so I decided to study sociology for my undergraduate degree. And in my senior year, I took a class on the American family. And for the first time, I was studying a topic that actually really pertained to me and my life. And I ran into a wall. And I had a crisis of faith. For my capstone project, I decided to study Mormon families in Utah and how these couples are able to balance work and family in our changing environment, where 50% of LDS mothers work, which is about on par with the nation. And I wondered how cultural pressures interacted with these families' lives. So I decided to look at some census data. I decided to look at some surveys. I read historical reports on previous church authorities and their messages about work and family. And then I decided to supplement that research with some qualitative data, with a few personal interviews with emerging families and newlyweds to empty nesters. And here's what I found. Working mothers feel guilty for working. Stay-at-home mothers feel guilty for staying at home. Fathers feel guilty for cutting back at work. And fathers feel guilty for not spending enough time with their kids. So I found lose-lose everywhere. And as I was interviewing these families, they felt like they had to justify their decisions to me. And I'm just this person. I don't have a stake in their choices, but they felt so guilt-ridden, and this guilt was fueled by fear. Fear that they were going to irreparably damage their children, fear that they weren't living up to their potential, or fear that their eternal salvation was at stake for the choices they made about how to parent their children. And I knew that I had always been concerned about this question because I grew up in a dual earner home. I intended to work as an adult and have a family, but I was astonished by the pain and the fear that everyone felt. And as I was reading these historical accounts of what previous church authorities had said about working and parenting, I felt physically wounded by some of their words. I felt that it fed on this fear that I found in these interviews. And I couldn't reconcile being in a church that seemed to take away joy when one of our main tenets is men are that they might have joy. And so, in April of 2011, I was in the midst of this crisis. And I was doing yard work at my parents' house, listening to General Conference over the radio. And I hear Elder Quentin L. Cook start to talk about LDS women and how they are incredible. And I thought, oh no, this is going to be another talk that makes women feel like they only have one choice in life and that if they do anything else, they're bad people. And I was really scared. But then he got to this part in his talk, where he said that first of all, no woman who stays at home should ever feel inferior or belittled because their work is the work of God. Second of all, we do not have any right to judge people on the choices they make regarding work and family because their decisions are personal between them and the Lord, and that is who they are accountable to, not you. And third of all, we as an LDS people should be at the forefront of making our workplaces more family friendly. And I remember standing there with tears streaming down my cheeks. And I felt liberated. Finally, my eternal salvation wasn't strictly contingent upon whether I worked or not. It was contingent upon whether I was following the personal path God gave to me and my family. And no one had a right to say anything otherwise. And I found my purpose in life. To help others live their lives according to God's purposes for them. To help them find a way to integrate their work and their family lives that was best for their family. And to personally follow God's mission for me. So, I enrolled in the MPA program so that I could learn the skills I needed to get me on this path, to get into a sector that cares more about work-family balance than any other sector, statistically speaking. And I couldn't be happier. That was the happy ending to my personal story. But my answer to Elder Cook's call to action is not everyone's answer. We can't all be work-life balance specialists, and I don't think he wants us to be. So what can you do? First of all, you can learn about the options that are available to you, whether through your HR rep, through books, through a consultant, through your own creativity. Find out what's available. Second of all, prayerfully consider with your spouse the choices that are right for you. Third of all, obey God's answers. And whether you're a single earner family or a dual earner family or somewhere in between, continue to pray to your Heavenly Father for guidance in your work and your family. And what may be most important of all is to not judge others for the choices they make, even and especially when they're different from your own. If you are in a position of authority in your organization, do not be a stumbling block to another person's happiness. Look over your organization's policies and see when they are particularly or unnecessarily inimical to family values. And I think if we can all come together as a society and rejoice in our families and in our work, and to rejoice other people's choices, we can come to a happy ending, and you can find yours. So find it. Thank you.